probably almost all liberals and a lot of conservatives believe that, the Roosevelt era redefined what rights are. My definition is you have a right to your life, you have a right to your liberty, and you have a right to keep what you earn. Right to demand something from your neighbor, which means you don't have a right to medical care. You don't have a right to education. You don't have a right to be fed, and certainly with the collapse of the housing bubble, you realize that the people who were claiming a right to own a house didn't deserve many of those houses, and somebody was in on the take, and it was a big boondoggle, and look, what happens? The people who we were intending to help, the poor people, they're the ones who end up losing their houses, losing their jobs, and ending up with the inflation. They're ending up with a lot of people say, well, they don't pay income tax, so they don't deserve any consideration. But it's the average, it's a poor person, low middle income person, middle class that suffers the consequences of inflation, and that's the real tax. The people who get to spend the money first, they benefit by it. Government spends it, banks spend it, corporations spend it, and then when it filters out there, like it'll be in the next year or two, you're going to see the cost of living going up. And the cost of living is going up today. It's just that they don't admit it to it, because if the government statistics start to show some negative signs, they change the way they calculate the statistic, and then tell the people, oh, there's no inflation and everything is okay. But the opportunity is here, and we must know exactly what we believe in. Now, the Constitution was far from a perfect document, probably the best written in history. But and if we followed it, we would be in a lot better shape. But there still were and are some imperfections on it. But there are some deliberate imperfections that drive the opposition to those who love big government, because they take the oath that I take. And believe me, they take it seriously, and they believe they're following it. It's just that they have been taught for decades now that the interpretation is entirely different. The General Welfare Clause means that that's the welfare state. The Interstate Commerce Clause says you can regulate every single thing we do in our lives. And the one that really is rather bizarre is the Necessary and Proper Clause. That comes at the end of Article 1, Section 8. They list all the things that we are authorized explicitly to do. But then it said, whatever law is necessary and proper to enforce those laws, you can write them. But they take the Necessary and Proper Clause and use it for anything they think is necessary and proper. So the Constitution has no meaning. And that means it's an educational struggle. That means we need a whole new generation that understands the difference and has a different attitude about government. Some people say, well, you can solve all this problem by just putting more restraints on the lobbyists and controlling the money in elections. That's not going to do any good. It just goes from the top of the table to under the table. And there's a lot there already. But we have a right to petition our government. We don't want any curtailment of that. We don't want to tell you like McCain-Feingold, a bill that says, oh, 90 days or 60 days before election, you're not allowed to electioneer. It's your money. I thought you were allowed to do that. But the problem is the system of government. It's the fact that government has so much control over our lives and over the economy, and they're passing out all the loot that they've stolen from us. So therefore, they have to, they have an incentive to do that. So even with that, you could stop it if you had only men and women of integrity in Washington that would resist this temptation to play this game, it would end. But the most important thing is getting rid of the power gravitating in Washington in order to clean up this mess. So over the years, I have noticed that our ideas have been spreading. When I first went to Congress in 1976, believe me, nobody had any idea what I was doing. They said, where is he coming from? What's he doing? This. Today, that hasn't happened. I was there for 4 terms, then I went back to medicine practice for 12 years and went back in 97. And things are a lot different, and they're a lot healthier. People are starting to understand it. And it was a real eye-opener for me in the presidential campaign. I was not discouraged a bit. I was, matter of fact, I was amazed that there was so much interest and so much excitement because I believed the message so sincerely and believed if we did the right things, we could get out of this. As long as we continue to do what we're doing right now to get us out of this economic mess, which is more of the same thing that got us in the mess, spending and deficits and borrowing and printing money, it's only going to make our problems that much worse. So we know that this message is spreading like a wildfire. It is spreading. And I try to figure it out myself. I'm always pleased with how the message spreads. I'm pleased that I'm a part of it. But the truth is I believe it's the professors in the colleges. And I understand you have a great economics department here. They told me about the good economics department, so I knew there'd be good students here. Now, this is what really counts, is that message is spread by teaching, in politics and in learning. It's through the internet. When I first started looking for information in the 1970s and in the 1960s, actually it was in the late 50s and 60s, it was hard to find books. And I resorted to getting a lot of my books from the Foundation for Economic Education, Leonard Reed's group up in Irvington, in New York. But now, there's no excuse. You have so much available to you, and it does spread. And I understand there's something called YouTube and a few things like that circulates a lot of information. So this to me is just a delightful time to change our ways. But if we do the wrong things, it'll be prolonged. Today in Japan, yesterday they had an election. They threw the guys. They've been in the party that's been in there for 50 years because they've been in a type of a recession since 1989. Their stock market hit at 4,000. I think it's around 11,000 or something now because they keep propping up the bad debts and all the mistakes, so they never allow the correction. We're doing the same thing. We did it in the Depression. And the worst part about this story, as of the moment, they believe in their hearts that they're successful. I mean, they brainwash themselves, and they'll say, they have a clunker program, car sales go up. Oh, it's working, it's working. So they want more and more of this. All it's going to do is prolong it. Now, if we did the right thing, it wouldn't be that bad. It has to be a correction. Corrections are good. If there's a mistake, you got to correct it. You're in too much debt, you got to get out of debt. If you personally are in debt, you need to do 2 jobs and spend less. Get out of debt. But a country has to do the same thing, or you compound your problems. And but if you did it that way, there would be some tough days. But the tough days would be because of the extravagance and the bad policies of the last 30 or 40 years, not because you're correcting the problems. And that's a difficult idea to sell, because as soon as there's problems, even right now, they're trying to play the same game as they did in the 30s. Oh, the 30s came about. Had nothing to do with the Federal Reserve. It had to do with capitalism and the gold standard, and that's why we had this depression. And right now, it was too much freedom, not enough regulation that was our problem. So they're dumping on more and more. But if we did the right things, we probably could be out of this in a year. And people would have to go back to savings. But just think of your incentives, because on top of the list, if you had a true reversal of the policies, you cut the foreign nonsense, you cut the welfare nonsense, but everybody gets a tremendous bonus because there'd be no income tax. What's the likelihood of us getting some people up in Washington and gradually get a majority and start voting this way? Don't hold your breath, because that's not good for your health. That's not going to happen, but you're still going to get an opportunity, because the system isn't going to work. And I think there's going to be a de facto nullification. I think eventually what happens is that the current system will just be ignored. People will just quietly walk away. because